Hello, I'm Yuli Sedma and I'm going to show you how to make very simple felt patches just using water and friction on the wool. They're very quick to make and it's a lovely thing to do with quite young children too. You can make these patches just for fun, or they can be cut to shape to apply to ready-made felt by needle felting them in. To make wet felt, this is what you need: a bowl of warm water, an old towel, a piece of recycled plastic is useful, some small snips, a rolling pin, some soap, and this is a wooden chopping board which is useful if you don't want to work direct on your table. And these are the different types of wool. So you've got naturally dyed fleece wool, just straight sheep's wool fleece. We've got tops, which comes in long lengths like this. We've got carded wool, which comes in what is called a bat. So these are all fibres all jumbled up. So I'm going to show the three different ways of preparing this for felting in your hands. Let's start with the dyed fleece. Sometimes dyed fleece can become a little felted, so you need to recognise the tufts, as in the tip end and the shorn end closest to the sheep's skin, which is where the sheep is shorn. Just ease out a tuft and tease open so that you can see the linearity of the fibres, and lay this down on your work surface. You should be able to make out the direction of the fibres, and then build up 2 or 3 layers, with each layer going at right angles to the previous one. I tend to make the layers quite fine, and some people make them thicker, so you will need to judge for yourself how many layers you will need, and you'll find that out by experience. If you see a thin patch, then tease out some more wool and press it down on top of the layers, the previous layers. Then wet your hands and scoop a palmful of water onto the middle of the patch. Rub a little soap into your hands and press down on the wool. The soap helps to break the surface tension of the water and soak it into the fibres. You can then press and gently at first move your palm around to assist with the soaking. If you want to neaten the edges, just gently tease up the stray fibres and smooth them in to give yourself a nice crisp edge. Then add a little more water if it needs it. It's got to be nice and flat, no bouncy bits. You might want to add a little bit more soap by rubbing soap onto your hands. But you don't want too much soap, because if it gets too frothy, this can actually slow down the felting process, the friction that you need to make the felting happen. So from this point on, you are now doing the action of felting, which is creating a friction against the wool, and that makes the wool mat together and become felt. And you can do this flat on the surface to start with, and then pick it up as you feel there's a slight change and you can handle it. And you start to become quite vigorous with this rubbing, and it won't fall apart. It shouldn't fall apart if you've got the right mixture of water and soap. Again, I say not too much soap, but enough to sort of paste the fibres together. So this process of holding a small patch in your hands will take about 2 to 4 minutes of rubbing and turning it over and moving it around in your hands. And slowly it becomes felted, and you can tell when you pinch at some of the fibres, or you can pull at what is now becoming felt as opposed to just fibres. Be conscious of your shoulders, they might be tensing up, so just give yourself a little break, have a sip of tea, and enjoy the process of transforming beautiful wool into felt. And then there comes a moment, I said it takes 2 to 4 minutes, when you think, yeah, this is holding together, it's felt, I can scrunch this up and it won't fall apart. And this point is called fulling or hardening of the felt. So you are bashing it around, basically. You're just really being quite rough with it. And that hardens it and shrinks it a little bit more, but really strengthens it. And you can do this as much or as little as you like, but you'll see it transforming very quickly then. And once you're happy with its transformation, you can wash it, get all that soap out. You can be quite rough with it, just get all the soap out and squeeze it out, and then dry it in the towel and dry the surface of the table, ready to start the next patch. So now I'm going to show you how to use the tops and make a bigger piece. So this is blue-faced Leicester wool, British wool. It's very good for felting. And here you can see I'm pulling off tufts of wool and sort of doing a fish scaling. That's where you overlap the tufts very slightly in both directions. And you can see that the fibres are mostly going in one direction here. So I'm creating the first layer. Then I'm putting a second layer down and the tufts are going at right angles. So overlapping these little tufts very slightly, the fish scaling, and completing that layer. And then my third layer is going at right angles again, so it's the same as the first layer. And when I'm happy that there are no gaps, I get my bowl of water and bar of soap, wet my hands and do this process again of a little bit of soap, wet hands, a little bit of water. You might want to sprinkle a lot more this time, obviously sort of 3 or 4 palmfuls of water, and perhaps a little bit more soap, and then put my hands down and jiggle them a little bit around, because that really helps to break that surface tension. And then very slowly, little bit of soap, little bit of water, pat it down, and you can see that there are puffy areas and then flatter, slightly darker areas where the water's gone right through. You don't want any puffy areas left at all. You want it to go, you want the water to spread right out to the edge. Keep working at it until it's completely flat and no puffy areas. You can tuck in the edges like we did before and make a nice crisp edge and smooth that down. Don't be afraid to use a little bit more soap, a little bit more water if you need, but not too watery and not too soapy. And then when you're happy with that, you can lay a piece of plastic over this, flush at the bottom, just smooth it out, and then start to roll this up around the rolling pin. I'm just adding an extra piece of plastic so that the wool is entirely encased in the plastic, and then I can start rolling, and this is what causes the friction and makes it transform into beautiful felt. I do this first bit of rolling for a couple of minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Obviously this is speeded up, I wouldn't work this fast. So after the 2 to 3 minutes I unroll the felt, really just to check that it's alright, but also I like to remove it from the plastic as quickly as I can so that I can continue just with my hands. And at this point it's looking like it needs a little bit of extra water and soap. It's looking a bit puffy, so a little bit sort of coming away there. So it's a really good point not to do too much felting for the first go, and then to make sure that you can smooth it down again with a bit of soap and your hands and start rubbing like you've done with the very small patch. And again, I'm speeding up the film so that you can see that I'm using both my hands to rub and pat it and turn it over. And I'll keep doing this for a few minutes. This whole patch took me just under 10 minutes to make. And then I test the surface, see if any fibres are coming out, see if it's stretching, see what it feels like. And if I'm not quite happy, then I might use the rolling pin, do a bit more of the rolling, just without the plastic again, not too much soap and water, and just keep going until I feel that this is going to be a really good piece of felt. Then I give it one more check to see what it's looking like. That's pretty good. I'm happy with that. And now the last stage of hardening the felt. That's being quite rough with it. It's going to shrink a little bit. I decided to add a little bit more soap and really scrunch it around. Give it a final check. I'm going to wash out the soap and stretch it out and dry it in the towel. Now this third piece is from the bats, and because the fibres are all jumbled up, you can just take off a tuft, a little patch, palm-sized, and I've chosen 2 different shades of green here so that you have different colour and different shades on each side. And then proceed in the same way as you did for the first yellow patch, the fleece. Just start wetting, soaping your hands, folding in the edges, and then patting it down. So continue in this way, pretty much as you've done before. So rubbing it in your hands, it takes 3 to 4 minutes. And remember to harden it, so scrunch it up in your hands when it's ready, and then you can give it its final wash.